Hey guys, what's up? It's your friendly neighborhood Oogus here. I'm going to be talking about the new Hearthstone expansion, Whispers of the Old Gods. I'm pretty excited for this expansion. There's a lot of really cool cards revealed so far. We're at 61 out of, I believe, 134 cards revealed, which basically means we're nearing the end of spoiler season, because the end of spoiler season is when pretty much like half the cards just get spewed out in one day. And so I was really excited to talk about these cards with you guys, but then I realized that there's a lot of cards and I have a lot to say about every single card. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just cover all of the legendaries, and then I might have a separate video for all of the non-legendaries that I think are going to make an impact on either of the constructed formats. But the legendaries is really where a lot of the cool flavor and stuff like that comes out. And where else to start than with the old gods themselves? So we're going to go in order of when they, how they were revealed. First we have Cthulhu, who's a 10 mana 6/6, who has a battle cry, deal damage equal to this minion's attack, randomly split among all enemies. And honestly, even 10 mana 6/6, deals 6, randomly split among all enemies, that's almost playable, to be completely honest with you. It's not great, but it's almost playable. The good news is that there are a lot of minions. I believe 16 is the number we're looking for. So far we've had like 5 revealed or something. And all of those minions are essentially cultists, and they'll add power and toughness, attack and health, if you want to use, Hearthstone terms and not be an idiot, to Cthulhu wherever he is. So, for example, there's one who's a 2 mana 2/3, give your Cthulhu +2/+2 wherever he is, which is pretty great. And it so far seems like the average is going to be +2/+2, which means that if you play 3 cultists before turn 10, your Cthulhu is going to be a 12/12. That's pretty good, because if you think about it, I would say on average when you build your deck around Cthulhu, you're probably going to get him to about a 14/14 before you play him. That's 4 cultists, which it could theoretically be 3 cultists if you have something like Bran, or if one of the later revealed cultists gives like +4/+4 or something. Or if you're, Twilight Elder, it's a spider tank that gives Cthulhu +1/+1 at the end of your turn. So if it survives, then it continually gives +1/+1. Something like that. It's theoretically possible to get to 14/14 with 3 cultists. So I would say 14/14 is probably the sweet spot. That's probably the average. And that's insane. A 10 mana 14/14 who does 14 damage randomly split among enemies is so insane. That's actually so crazy, right? Like, when you think about it, if your opponent has, let's say, 7 health total of minions on their side of the board, right? 14 damage. It's theoretically possible you don't kill all their minions, but statistics would indicate that the majority of the time you're probably going to kill all of your opponent's minions. And fortunately, with the way that these random damage effects work, you can't overkill a minion. So what'll happen is, if they have 7 health, you'll go like face, minion, 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 face, minion, minion, right? And then at some point all the minions are dead, and instead of wasting damage on the minions, you'll continue going face. So in the situation where your opponent has 7 total health of minions, you can probably assume that the majority of the time that situation arises, all their minions are dead, and they're taking 7 to the face, right? Obviously, that's not exactly how it works, and oftentimes, you'll experience something different, but it's definitely very, very powerful effect. And then, here's the other thing. That's a powerful battle cry. Oh yeah, and also you get a 14/14. Like, it's so crazy. It's actually insane. Like, Cthulhu, okay, he requires your opponent to have a large removal spell, right? Such as BGH, if he doesn't get nerfed. Like, if he still kills giant minions, like he currently does. They need a BGH, they need a Hex, they need a polymorph, they need an entomb, they need one of those, right? They that's it, or a shadow word death, right? Like they need something to kill a giant monster. Because if they don't have it, you have won. Because you get a gigantic monster along with an incredible battle cry that most of the time is actually going to fully clear your opponent's board. I don't know. I think Cthulhu is insane. The most playable old god, and he was the first to be revealed, which is awesome. So we're going to move on to the second old god that got revealed, and this one's pretty cool because he actually, we didn't know what he looked like at all until this card got revealed. And I'm, of course, talking about our good buddy Nizar the Corruptor. 10 mana, 5/7, battle cry, summon your death rattle minions that died this game. I mean, I'd give him a perfect 5 out of 7 personally. Dude, I love memes. Okay, so Nizar is pretty interesting. He's playable, but in a weird kind of way. So, okay, obviously the thing about Cthulhu is that you build your deck around him, at least like half your deck around him. You want a certain amount of cultists in your deck. Nizar is similar. In fact, all of them are kind of similar in that regards, where you want to build your deck around him. But he's different, because you don't need to put these essentially vanilla statted minions in your deck. Instead, you get to rebuy all of your death rattle minions. And generally, death rattle minions are pretty strong, because a lot of times they're sticky, right? They're minions that have an okay body on the front half, and then when they die, they summon a slightly worse body on the back half, and those two bodies combined happen to be valued much higher than their mana cost. And then when you get a second use out of them, with something like Nizar, then you get a lot of value in that way. It is worth noting that this does not summon minions who were given a death rattle. It only summons minions that have the text death rattle. It doesn't matter if when they died, they had a death rattle effect occur. It doesn't matter if they were silenced before they died. The only thing that matters is a minion that you control that died and has the death rattle text in their box, right? That's the only thing that matters. So, unfortunately, this will not bring back something like Unearthed Raptor, and it will always bring back something like Tyrion, even if Tyrion was silenced before death. So, in that regards, it's pretty good. And the other thing is, if you do have 6 death rattle minions die, then he's very good, because you play him on turn 10, and now you have a full board of 7 minions from an empty board. And that's why his stats are so low. And it turns out 5/7 is actually a pretty good stat line. 5/8 would be incredibly much stronger, like a large amount stronger. And that's simply because 6 and 7 are kind of breakpoints when it comes to medium removal. Specifically, I'm referring to Fireball. And in some cases, something like Crackle. So it turns out that having 7 health is generally not great, because they can Fireball ping him. But that's kind of equalized in the fact that he's not coming onto the board alone. You actually get tons of other dudes with him, assuming you built your deck around him. So it's hard to say, because I mean, obviously, I think in Wild he's going to be insane, and that's simply because in Wild you have access to all the Naxxramas minions, and that's where the most powerful death rattles happen to be. That and Piloted Treader from GVG. In Standard, there's a lot less powerful death rattles, but there still probably is enough. I mean, just, like I mentioned, Tyrion is pretty gigantic. There have been a couple cards revealed in this set that have reasonable death rattles. Infested Tauren, I think, is one. It's like a pretty understated taunt minion, but when it dies, it summons a 2/2 slime. Kind of like Sludge Belcher, except the slime is 2/2 instead of 1/2, and also doesn't have taunt, so it's much worse. And then there's the 1 mana 1/1. When he dies, you summon a 1/1. And there's a 4 mana 1/1 who, when he dies, you summon a 5/5. And like those are good. They're sticky minions, and sticky minions are generally best with N'Zoth. So I can see him finding a home in Standard, but he's probably much more likely to be played a lot in Wild, simply because of the cards that I mentioned. Pretty much explicitly because Shredder is so broken. That card is insane. I mean, if I could literally just play 10 mana, 5/7, Battlecry, summon a piloted Shredder, I'd play it. I'll be honest. I would play that card, right? Like you have 9-10 stats on the front end, split across 2 bodies, and then when they die, you summon a 2-drop. Or when, the 4/3 dies, you summon a 2-drop. Like, that's already pretty damn good, right? Like, that's already arguably playable. The main problem with N'Zoth, in fact, it's the main problem with pretty much all the old gods aside from Cthulhu, they don't do anything to the board. Like, if you're dead, if your opponent has you dead on board, it's a complete dead card in your hand. N'Zoth can be not a dead card because you can summon like Sludge Belcher, Infested Tauren, Tyrion, like taunts. But even then, a lot of times it's going to be a dead card. And the other problem with N'Zoth is that I don't think we know for sure how his summoning works, whether it's random or order-based, or alphabetical or whatever. Basically, if you have more than 6 Death Rattles die, which 6 do you get with N'Zoth? Because, of course, you can't have more than 7 minions on the board. N'Zoth counts as 1, so you can only ever get 6 back. Maybe somebody has the answer to this. I don't know. I didn't see the answer. I've been, obviously browsing the web since this card got revealed, and I haven't seen an answer to that question, so I don't know. But if it's random, then you run this risk because oftentimes in the N'Zoth deck, you're going to be running, 15 to 20 other minions that have Death Rattle or something. That might be a little bit on the high side, but, maybe. So by the time that N'Zoth comes down, maybe you've had, 8 minions die with Death Rattle, and maybe you just don't get your Belcher, right, because it's random. And that can obviously, it can sting a lot. So that, there's positives and negatives. I do think N'Zoth is going to find a pretty strong spot in Wild, and in Standard, you're going to have to work for it, but it's possible. Moving on to our next old god, Arge Rage Unbound, 10 mana 10/10. At the end of your turn, put a minion from your deck into the battlefield. Okay, I think this guy is way underrated. Whether he's good, he's playable, I think. I think he's playable, but I think he's very underrated. First, I'm going to clarify a rules little thing with his text box. If he summons something like a Ragnaros or a Ysera, they do not trigger their effect on the turn they're pulled out of your deck, which is a downside. However, I don't think that's a huge problem. If you see Y'Sharge, he runs in, he has the same issue as N'Zoth, where it's if you're dead on board, he probably won't save you, right? Which makes him not that exciting of a 10-drop. But if you're even on board, or if you're ahead on board, I feel like Y'Sharge is going to be pretty strong. Because what he does is he offers this gigantic body who forces a large removal spell, because a 10/10, as you probably know, is a 3-turn clock if your opponent has full health, which is pretty substantial. And then also he summons on only, even if you do answer him immediately, no matter what, he's going to get value. He's going to pull something out of the deck. And it turns out that if you just look at his mana cost versus the stats that he has, it turns out that all he has to really do is pull a medium-sized 2-drop to actually equalize his mana cost, right? It's a bit... it's not really like a science, I guess, in terms of the stats versus mana cost, because he's a 10 drop. That sort of stuff is a lot more relevant when we're talking about, the 2 through 4s. And you're talking about stats per mana cost. But it is true that if you use like the same formula, all you really need is him to pull out like a 3/2, and it's okay. However, that's not exciting. So people, think that's bad or something. But in reality, I can imagine a situation where you just play him turn 10, board is even, 10 mana 10/10, he yanks out like, I don't know, a 4/4, right? And now you have a 10/10 and a 4/4 that you didn't have the turn before, and that rhymed. And now your opponent has to deal with it. Because if they don't, you're chunking them for half of their health just with you expending one card. And the issue that a lot of people have been bringing up is that it overcommits you to the board, which is not true. It's simply false. It doesn't overcommit you at all. What it does is it makes your opponent's sweepers essentially mill one card. That's assuming you pull something that doesn't have Death Rattle, right? It essentially just mills one card. And the reason that that's not exciting, you probably wouldn't play a card if it said destroy a 10/10, mill a card, right? If your Light Bomb turned into kill a 10/10, mill a card, you probably wouldn't play that card, right? That doesn't sound very exciting. And that's because milling matters, like it literally doesn't matter until you're at the bottom of your deck. That's the only time milling matters, right? Because, for example, if we talk about Fell Reaver, if I play Fell Reaver and my opponent immediately answers it with BGH, I will lose 3 cards off of my deck. Yes, it's true, I can see those cards, my opponent can see those cards, and can play around the fact that those cards are gone. At least one of the 2 of each of those 3 cards is gone. But that doesn't matter, because if those were the bottom 3 cards of my deck, if the game doesn't go to the point where I'm drawing the third to last card of my deck, that didn't matter. If those 3 cards were at the bottom, it would be the same exact effect. The only difference is the information isn't known about, right? So the reason Yoggsaron doesn't overcommit is because he's not costing you a card resource. He's costing you a deck resource. And deck resources are much less important than card resources. If my opponent has 10 cards in hand and I have 1, chances are my opponent's going to kick the shit out of me, right? If I have 1 card in my deck and my opponent has 10 cards in his deck, and we both have a grip of 5 cards in hand, it's really hard to determine which one of us is going to win. Right? Like that situation is much more up in the air. And that's why Yoggsaron, him pulling the card out of your deck and then, oh, well, now a sweeper is live, is not a big deal at all. It really doesn't matter. So I think people are underrating this card. I don't know if it's actually good enough to see play in like a competitive deck, but I do think he's way, way, way better than most people are assuming. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our 4th and final Old God of this set. This would be our good buddy Yoggsaron, Hope's End. 10 mana, 7/5. Give it a perfect 7 out of 5, right? That's how that meme works. Battle Cry. Cast a random spell. For each spell you've cast this game, target's chosen randomly. Alright, so if you've never been to Atlantic City or Las Vegas, this guy pretty well simulates the experience. It's really weird, okay? It's a weird card. It's weird. And I promise you people are going to be playing this guy for months in their real decks, like at legend rank. Whether or not he's good, I mean, like, maybe? I don't know, because, okay, it's a really tough card to talk about. Okay, it's really hard, because Mathematics would dictate that the more spells you cast, the less variance involved. Okay? But that's not right, that's variance in the mathematical sense. In terms of the logical sense, even though technically they're supposed to be the same thing, like I feel like the variance is still very high. Like I feel like as you cast more spells, the variance in terms of a logical sense does get higher. In terms of the mathematical sense, it gets lower, and that's because basically what variance when it comes to statistics is like looking at is essentially outcomes compared to the average, right? So like if you took all 200 something spells in Hearthstone and just smashed them together into one average spell, the more spells you cast, let's say I cast 10 spells, right? Yoggsaron will just grab 10 random spells and just make them happen. That's going to be closer to 10 of the average spell that you've created than one random spell is to one average spell. However, when it comes to actual in-play variance, I think it's never going to get low, you know? There's never going to be a sweet spot for Yoggsaron where the variance is low enough that it's, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen, right? That's not going to ever happen. So it's pretty much you roll the dice. So he can do anything, literally anything. And if he tries to play a card like, say, Demon Fuse, and you don't have a demon out, it'll just fizzle, and it'll take up one of the spell slots. If you build a deck around Yoggsaron, chances are you're probably going to have casted around 10 spells by the time you play Yoggsaron. Maybe a little bit more. Depends on the deck, I suppose. If you're playing him in like a rogue deck, I can imagine somewhere between 10 and 15 being average. But, you're playing 10 spells, and it's entirely possible for him to just Pyroblast your face 3 times and you die, right? Like, that's a thing that could happen. He could also, just kill your entire board and then Tree of Life, so you and your opponent are at full HP and their board is completely alive. He could also play a new spell that got revealed today where it turns all of your healing into damage for the turn. It's a 2-mana spell, Akanai Soul Priest, basically, for 1 turn. And then cast Tree of Life and make a draw. Like, these are all possible outcomes. So, it's weird. And then here's the other weird thing. I don't know if it's been talked about yet, but so this is what's confusing me. Because when you do something, like let's talk about the example of dying during a spell effect. In all cases that currently exist in Hearthstone, if you die during a spell effect, the spell effect will complete. And oftentimes, it can actually kind of continue into the next spell effect if it causes more than one. And the only real example I have for that situation is if you have 2 Burrowing Mines in your deck from Iron Juggernaut, and you draw the first one, and you go to under 0 life, it will draw the second, and the second will deal the damage, and then you'll draw your next card, and then you die. So, in that instance, my assumption is, because this is one effect from Yoggsaron, my assumption is that you can draw the game. If Yoggsaron Pyroblasts your face 3 times, and you're dead, it will continue casting spells until the effect is over, which means that you could pull out 3 more Pyroblasts to your opponent's face, and you could make it a draw. I don't know if that's true, but that's my assumption based on the way that Hearthstone works. The problem is, Hearthstone, unlike something like Magic, the rules are kind of whatever the programmers want them to be. There's no need for rule enforcement, and as such, there's inconsistencies like the one I'm currently talking about. So it's entirely possible that he'll Pyroblast your face 3 times, and then the game ends. That's just as likely as him being able to draw the game after somebody dies. At least I think so. So, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Like, this guy is weird. And I'm going to play with him. If I open him, I'm going to play with him. But I don't know. It's really confusing. I don't know. Like, there's really nothing I can say about Yoggsaron. The only thing I can really say about him is that Yoggsaron, probably on his own, is going to keep Trollden employed for another 3 years at least. So that's a good thing. That's a pro. I would put that in the pro list for the pros and cons. Beyond that, I really don't think there's much more to say about Yoggsaron. I don't know. Play him, have fun with him. He's probably never going to be competitive, but he could be, I guess. He depends so much on the sort of situation that he's in. So in standard, there's less spells, which makes the effect slightly more predictable, but there's still like over 200 spells. So yeah, who knows? I mean, anything can happen. This is the true anything can happen card. It's not anything can happen. This is straight up like, play it. I don't know. Oh, I can't hit end turn. That means the game ended. Let's sit here and find out how it ended, you know? So, I don't know. He's weird. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry that was what we had to end on. I mean, Yoggsaron's weird. That's really all there is to say about him. But thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Next video, we're going to be talking about the class legendaries. If not all of them are revealed by the time that I record the next video, I'll probably split that into 2 parts. So look forward to that, and I will see you guys later.